I'm Frank from Canadian Tropicals, and this is Latte. Today I'm going to talk about citrus trees and growing them outdoors all year on the Canadian West Coast. So let's start off with a story. I, probably like you, years ago, my first citrus plant was a Meyer lemon, and I followed all the instructions that they gave me. That was to keep the soil dry and don't let it get too wet, and to bring the citrus tree into the house during the winter. And if you were like me, my tree suffered. It did not like those instructions. When I brought it into the house, it would defoliate, and it would stress out. 1 year it didn't defoliate, but it stressed out still and attracted a lot of scale, and the scale overwhelmed it and actually ended up killing that tree. So since then I've learned a lot, and one of the things I've learned is that all those instructions that you get from most nurseries when you buy your citrus trees are wrong. They're not wrong per se, they're meant for another climate. Those instructions are meant for people in California or Arizona. They're not meant for Canadians. So let's start off with the keeping the soil dry issue. On the West Coast here, we get rain and we get lots of it. So you'll notice that behind me, I have my citrus trees. I've got pomelos, I've got grapefruit, I've got orange trees, I've got lemon trees, lime trees, etc., etc. And they're all in very large pots. They're in free draining pots, so that when water's entered into the pot, it doesn't stagnate in the pot. So that's one of the key things, is I leave my citrus trees out on the deck in full sun or full sky exposure. I don't protect them from the rain at all, and they don't suffer from it. They in fact seem to like it. The one thing that you do have to watch out for is that in the colder, wetter months, you may start to see some chlorosis on the leaves, and that's because in the colder temperatures, the citrus do have harder time uptaking nutrients. It's not that big of, for me, I find it's not that big of a deal. As soon as I see the chlorosis, I compensate and I'll give it a little more fertilizer. But they generally don't do a lot of their growing during the coldest months. So just making sure that they have enough nutrients to keep those leaves healthy. If the leaves aren't healthy when cold snaps come, your tree will suffer more. So it is important to make sure that those nutrients are there for the plant and that the rain hasn't washed them all out. And the other thing is that when you go to move your tree indoors, it can take a couple of weeks of acclimatization if you don't want to stress the house plant out, or stress the citrus tree out. And that means a couple of weeks of few hours outdoors, few hours indoors, few hours outdoors, few hours indoors. And if you'll notice, I have a lot of citrus trees, and that would be a massive amount of work to be moving these plants back and forth every day, and B, I simply don't have the room inside my house for that many citrus trees. When they do move indoors, it's also a sudden change in temperature that's quite severe if you wait for later in the year. So if you're in California, it can be 10, 15 degrees Celsius outdoors, and moving it indoors to where it's 5 degrees Celsius, 6 degrees Celsius warmer is not that big of a deal. So when somebody in California moves their plant indoors, there's not a huge temperature shock that's occurring. If, however, I were to move these plants indoors right now, it's currently 3 degrees outside. And, so if I move that indoors, that 3 degrees Celsius going to a 21 degrees Celsius, that is a major temperature shock for a plant. So even if I try to acclimatizing it at this time of the year, it's still going to suffer some stress. Also, Our very wet winters, the air is much more humid, and going indoors where the air is very dry also stresses out those plants, as I say, as it's starting to rain. So for those reasons, I don't take my plants into the house anymore. So what I do is I actually have a guideline based on our climate here, and that is because all of the citrus that I own are either zone 9 or zone 8 citrus. I don't have any zone 10 citrus. And zone 9 plants can handle some frost, and zone 8 plants can handle to -12 in the ground. So what I do is, if the temperature goes to -2, then I will move the zone 9 citrus into my unheated garage. If the temperature drops to -4, then I will move the zone 8 citrus into my unheated garage. And so the unheated garage is, during those cold spells, is usually around 12 to 15 degrees Celsius. So I'm moving it, during the day, I'll be moving it when it's 4 or 5 degrees into a 10, 15 degrees Celsius room. It's not as much of a swing in temperature. The garage is also more humid, so there's not that big adjustment to humidity as well. So the rest of the time, I follow another guideline, and that is when I see that there's a possibility of frost, and tonight the temperature is going to drop to 0 degrees. So when I see there's a possibility of frost, I cover the plants. I have a tarp, I cover them up, and that way, what I want to do is I want to keep the frost off the leaves and the fruit. When frost is on citrus leaves, they can have a super cooling effect. And when the wind goes across that leaf, it can drop that temperature to much, much colder. And that's the other reason that I take the zone 8 citrus into the garage at -4, because at -4, if there is a strong wind, that temperature with the wind chill could still drop to -7, -8, or sometimes a little cooler. So I'm still allowing for that zone 8 plant in a pot. So you want to go one zone up. So you want to treat a zone 8 plant in a pot as if it was in the ground at zone 9. And really, that's all I do for my winter care. I don't put them in a greenhouse. I don't keep them up against the house to protect them from the rain. They're out here in the rain, in the snow. I don't care if it snows as long as the temperature is above 0. And the things that I use to cover it, I use a tarp. Originally, when I only had 1 or 2 citrus trees, I would just put a garbage bag over the citrus tree. And in the morning, I would take the garbage bag off, because it's a small confined space, it's a black bag. You don't want to roast the plant when the sun comes out. So I would just take those off. With the large tarp that I'm using, plus I'm using a second tarp, so I'm covering an area that is about 10 feet by 12 feet. So that's a large enough area that I don't have to worry about that baking effect occurring. So I'll just leave the tarp on the plants unless I see it warm up considerably during the day. But if the day temperatures are only 4 or 5 degrees, I'll just leave the tarp on all day. And what I found is that by going by that -2, -4 guideline, even last year when we had that unusually cold winter and we saw an extreme go to -16, even during that winter, my citrus plants only spent a total of about 2 weeks in the garage. And the rest of the time they were outdoors in full sun, enjoying the clean air. And I find that my plants are just that much healthier. Going back to my example about having the scale infestation, when you take your plants indoors, you have no natural predators present. So insects like scale or aphids, they can just take off. By leaving my plants outdoors all year, I also have the plants in an environment where when scale and aphids want to thrive, the natural predators are also present. So they help control those problems. So yeah, I have some scale on my citrus trees, but I haven't had a full-blown infestation since I stopped taking them into the house. So I'll just quickly show you how I cover these plants. And like I said, it's very straightforward. So I have a large awning canopy. Sorry, I have a large awning canopy, and I put the silver side outwards. That helps reflect some of the sun and diminish that overheating effect that can occur. If it's windy, you may want a second person to give you a hand. But when it's not windy, it's a fairly straightforward process. And then once I have the canopy over the pots, I take some clamps. They're really cheap at Home Depot. And I just clamp the four corners to the pots. And because my tarp or because the number of plants I have exceed the length of the tarp, I just add a second tarp for that extension area. That's all. Once again, silver side facing out helps reduce the possibility of overheating the plants. And like I said, on the days when the temperature does jump up to 10-15 degrees during the day, but it's still going to be below zero at night, I'll take this off during the day. But if it's only 3 or 4 degrees during the day like it is now, I'll leave them on all day and won't worry about them. And like I said, on the West Coast climate, most 1 or 2 weeks in the garage, unheated. The rest of the time, they're outdoors. And something that I make sure to do when I'm combining tarps is I make sure to clamp the tarps together, because I don't want wind coming and getting in between. Thanks for watching. Remember to leave a comment, click on the subscribe button, and if you're in Canada, visit my store in Etsy. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching. Bye.